Right, so we are now making our way. You can see this happening now. We're making our way through Paul's letter to the Romans. We are now on part 3 and a little bit of part 4. We didn't do the reading for part 4, but he goes on to talk about Abraham and Abraham's faith in part 4. But part 3 of Romans. So just to recap, if you understand what is happening here, there was a man named Paul. Paul was a Pharisee. As I have been pointed out, he wasn't really like a monk. He was more like a very right-wing, reformy type fellow. But someone who wanted to tell everybody, this is how things need to be done. If we could just get it right, if you could just do it properly, if we could just measure up to the law, and I'll do everything right, you guys have to do everything right, and then God will come back, and he will like us, and he will come and live in our temple again, and everything will be put back together properly. And then he gets word that there is this person going around claiming to be the king, claiming to be the Messiah they were waiting for, and he's been executed as a criminal. He thinks this whole thing is ridiculous and scandalous, particularly the fact that he died in this appalling way on the cross. He goes to persecute these followers, and then suddenly has this revelation that actually Jesus is the Messiah. Jesus is the king. This one that they've been waiting for is this person who sacrificed himself. And suddenly his whole worldview is transformed. And so he goes out trying to write letters to the other churches, trying to tell people about Jesus, trying to get people to understand what has happened, but doing it from this position of deep conviction himself of who he was and then what he has become. And one of the things he is doing is writing this letter to the church in Rome, trying to explain what this all means, because he wants to get to them, but he fears he might not. And so he starts off talking about the fact that you can see this in all creation. That actually there is no excuse when you look at the world, when you look at just the beauty of creation, but the way that everything is unfolding, you have to be made of stone to think that there is not something behind all of this. To think that there is no spiritual aspect to what is happening, that God has revealed himself. And that within that, our part of, as humans, is to live in line with that. They described it in those, so there are some nice metaphors in the Bible Project videos if you've not come across them. One of them is about making a beautiful instrument and trying to work with the grain of the wood so that all of this comes out perfectly and beautifully. If you're going against the grain, everything is out of harmony, it doesn't work properly. But if you can flow with the grain and you create this beautiful instrument capable of all of these amazing sounds, and that humans are designed like that, to live with the grain of the universe, to be in tune and in harmony, to love each other, to care for the world, and all of those things constitute what it is to actually love God as well. And then the problem is, because we are not automatons, because love must be freely chosen and freely given in order to be love, we don't. That we are given this target of perfect love, and we miss again and again and again. And this is what the word sin actually means. It's not a list of things. It means missing the mark, missing the target, failing to be who we were meant to be, who we are in the eyes of God. And this is where we got to Rosanna talking last week from Romans 2, saying, I'm afraid it's all a bit of a mess. I am afraid what was a beautiful garden has become a terrible mess. And that this is the situation that we find ourselves in. And Paul's answer to this mess was to try and make people clear it up themselves. But when Jesus comes along, he has this whole different approach. And he's kind of saying to people, well, if you think you can clear it up yourselves, if you think that nothing is that bad and that you can fix it, I've not really got anything to give you here. But if you know that there is a problem, if you know that you need help, if you know that you are sick and that you need a doctor, this is the metaphor that he uses. He says, that's who I have come for. And so what Paul then starts to talk about are these two massive strands. If you want to understand the kind of fundamentals of existing as a Christian, the thing that draws this relationship with God in, the journey that they take through the Old Testament and then through what Jesus does, it is about law and it is about grace. And the interesting circumstance that you find yourselves in is you have what you might call either a high view or a low view of the law, and a high view or a low view of grace. And these things relate to one another. So Paul, considering himself a Pharisee as he was, born into these religious institutions, educated in all these ways, really diligently observing all of these things, he would have been, if he was in the church, he would have been the one that did every single job. He would have arranged all the things perfectly, made sure everything was happening right. He would have turned up every Sunday to every service, taken his communion very seriously, done all the things, gone out, performed the acts that he was supposed to perform. He would have said, I am taking this thing seriously. I am reverent in my approach to my religion. I am doing all the things I should do right. And I've been accused of lots of strange things throughout my existence. One of those is maybe being a bit irreverent. That maybe it seems like I'm not taking all of this seriously enough because I'm not solemn enough. I'm not downbeat enough about what we're doing. But I think the approach that I take is to take a very high view of the law. I think if you imagine that you can come to church and you can perform these things, and that if we do these things properly, then God will owe you some kind of salvation, or that you have done things right and therefore you are in, and then there are people who don't do those things, and those people out there are sinners, and they are bad, and they don't come and do the stuff that God has asked them to do, but one day they might learn and they'll come and do what we're doing. To me, that is a very low view of the law. If you somehow think that you can achieve what God has asked you to do by performing a few things in your life, or even by performing everything in your life, you are still taking too low a view of the law. We have, on a number of occasions, as Joe particularly busily invited people to come in these doors from the pub, from other places that we'd encountered in the world. And the reaction often was, I can't possibly walk through those doors, I will burst into flames. We've heard it again and again. I cannot walk into the doors of the church, I will burst into flames. And what they're actually talking about, they are thinking along the same lines. They're thinking along the lines of, yes, there's good people in here who do the right things, and there's bad people out there who do the wrong things. And because I'm a bad person, if I walk in, I will burst into flames. And they are thinking Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. They are thinking about the Old Testament temple and the God of the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire. They are actually taking a high view of the law. They are taking this thing seriously. They're saying, if I acknowledge the existence of God and I dare set foot in his presence, I will be instantly destroyed. Because I am so broken. I am so lost. I am so unworthy. If I acknowledge myself before God's law, there will be nothing left of me. And this is what Jesus then reiterates when he gets to the Sermon on the Mount. That he tries to get them to understand the extent of the law. That he says, yes, here are your 10 commandments. Well done. You know what you're supposed to be doing. Don't have any other gods. Good. We haven't got any others. We've just got this one. Don't kill anyone. Has anybody killed anyone today? Brilliant. We're doing really, really good. Don't commit adultery. Don't steal things. Don't do this. Don't do that. Great. We're in. And Jesus says, you just missed what's going on. This just isn't about, did I cross that line or did I not cross that line? It's about your heart. It's about your relationship with God. It's about the fact that actually even one angry thought counts as murder. Even one lustful thought counts as adultery. Even one jealous thought constitutes theft in this context. That actually the level of purity required to come into God's presence is simply unachievable. This is why he writes that the law is not there to bring righteousness. The law is there to draw out this understanding of how unbelievably lost we are. That it's not just that we failed ever so slightly to colour inside the lines. It's that what we have presented is just a catastrophic mess. It's not comfortable to hear. This is where Rosanna took us last week as well. It isn't easy. But actually it is this thing of honesty. It's this thing of don't be afraid of that light. That if Jesus came as this light of the world, you can't say, well, I'm only going to let God shine a light on the bit of me that I like. You have to say, all of me's got to come into the light. I'm going to take my drawing up to show him, even though it is a catastrophe. Because I want all of it to be in the light. And the reason that we can do that is because of this thing that Paul says is good news. And again, you mustn't short circuit. You mustn't short circuit what the good news and say, yeah, the good news is Jesus saved us and everything's great. There is a level before that. The good news is that Jesus is the King. That Jesus is the Messiah. That Jesus is the ruler. That Jesus is in charge of everything. Because the law and the king are directly related to one another. If you have a king, by definition, there is a law, there is a structure. There is something that indicates this person is here, everything flows down from that, this person has authority, you are under them. Their judgment is the thing that exerts the meaning, the power, the law, and everything else in the land. And if you are fortunate, you have a good king who is just and kind, and will bring justice into the world and will try and bring order into the world. If you are less fortunate, you might have a terrible king. You might have a king that brings disorder and division. A king who is still in charge and still controls the law, but uses these things to divide and to break things apart. But Paul says, I have got some really good news. Jesus is king. And that when he understands what it is that Jesus did, that he says, yeah, the king is righteous, the king has the law, the king will put things into right relationship, but our king sacrificed himself for us. Our king said, actually, I will die as a criminal in your place. That all of that mess, all of the chaos, all of the disorder, everything that you wanted to keep hidden, he said, bring all that into the light and I will pay for it. That everything that would have kept you out of these doors, he said, all of that is gone. And what you have is this free gift. You could not possibly have earned it. But God says, for free, I give you grace. That for free, everything is forgiven and you are brought back into relationship with God. We sang Amazing Grace at the wedding yesterday, and there was quite a few people afterwards who said, I don't think I'd ever heard anything beyond the first verse of Amazing Grace. But once you get to the remember the second verse? Grace that taught my heart to fear. That coming into this understanding of God, realizing the magnitude of what was going on, and my heart just quakes inside of me, and then grace, my fear is relieved. Because I realised that actually, even though there was a king and a judge and a way that I should have lived, what he has for me is mercy. What he has for me is grace. What he has for you is forgiveness. It is only by taking this extraordinarily high view of the law, this view of the law that says, yeah, not a single one of us should step foot inside God's temple. We should all be thinking the same thing. I cannot come in that building. I will burst into flames. But then you have this extraordinarily high view of grace that says, this is the place where I come to have an extraordinary party with God. This is the place where I come to sing and dance and celebrate and show love and gather ourselves together, because we are all brought in through nothing other than his love and his sacrifice. Place everything on that. Put all your faith in that. There's no deeds, there's no works, there's no rules, there's no anything. There is only faith that he loves you. But you can put everything on that promise. So Lord, I pray, Lord, for all of us, for me, for everyone here. Lord, never let us be deluded, never let us hide in darkness. Let us bring our whole selves into your light, to know that everything we have done has been done in the sight of God. But then, Lord, in that light, let us know that there is now no condemnation because of our King Jesus Christ. Lord, we pray this in Jesus' holy name. Amen.